Hey Global Village, what's up? Okay, today I want to get back on my favorite hobby horse, which is artificial intelligence. And my goal, I think, is to try perhaps yet again, and probably unsuccessfully, to better elucidate uh, why I think people are just not properly understanding the limitations of AI technologies as it currently stands, and how there's just a tremendous amount of hyperbole around AI, and specifically how people like Mark Zuckerberg, who quite frankly should know better, are using terms such as superintelligence, and kind of suggesting that artificial general intelligence is just around the corner, which is absolute utter bullshit. And I want to just kind of talk about reasons why I might feel that way. Uh, I think one of the most important things that we need to understand about software in general, and I'm not just talking about AI, but certainly AI software is included in this discussion, is that these technological artifacts, whilst they have computational and logical processing powers, have no inner world. Now, consider looking into the eyes of your cat or your dog. I don't think most people would believe that your cat or dog has no inner life, that it's feeling and experiencing things behind its eyes, that there's this world that we have no direct access to, but which your cat and your dog enjoys, and that they may express that inner world that they're experiencing, say through wagging their tail or barking or meowing or jumping up onto the kitchen bench and trying to eat the food that you've put into the plate before you've even had a chance to put it on the ground. That inner world is just not a thing for even the most powerful current large language model that, I don't know, has like a, you know, 2 or 3 city blocks worth of GPU compute power dedicated to it. It is purely an automation, okay? And yet, what most people are doing, lay people especially, is that they just continue to anthropomorphize this technology and treat it as if there's something special or magical going on behind its digital eyes. And there simply is not. So, for me, the biggest and most important question we have to ask ourselves about, a true breakthrough in AI is whether at some point we can understand and discover the spark of consciousness, that mechanism by which we are able to know ourselves. And I have talked about that in the past with regards to the attention schema theory, which I personally found to be the most compelling explanation of our own consciousness. Now, if in fact the attention schema theory is valid and it has some legs, some legitimacy, then it is possible that we may be able to engineer a kind of artificial consciousness. And I think were we to do that, and then were that consciousness able to leverage off the extreme amount of compute power available to it through, LLMs and the massive scale of sort of brute force training that you can apply to those kind of mechanisms over just an enormous depth and breadth of information and data, then we've got something that we can really talk about here. Something that's probably genuinely really scary, but also unbelievably possesses some unbelievable potential that probably goes well beyond what a human could do. But at that point, if that were true and there was some kind of inner light, some kind of inner awareness within that technology, then straight away we have to start talking about basic rights as it pertains to this kind of new AI creation. Because if it does have an inner world and an inner experience, then it has inherently some basic rights, or at least it should do, in a so-called civilized human world. Because certainly we do think our domesticated cats and dogs have some basic rights. There is such a thing as animal cruelty, and that only exists because we recognize that these animals are in fact able to suffer because of the fact that they have an internal world. So as soon as an AI, and we suggest that it actually does have an internal world, then we have a serious ethical issue which we need to talk about. And that actually relates back to several years ago now, where I actually did write my first and currently only full-blown science fiction novel, which I have yet to unleash on the world, but which I do want to do so. And I'm going to talk more about that in the future. It's a subject very near and dear to my heart, but also a subject that causes me a lot of personal suffering and a lot of confusion. But I digress. We're talking about the current state of the art of AI and why I'm just dismayed at the level of ignorance and disinformation that I think is being spread about the current state of the art. And one of those people who's doing that, of course, is Mark Zuckerberg. Now, it turns out that he had employed a gentleman who was one of the forefathers of AI, and it has come to light more recently that it appears Mark is a little bit unhappy with the lack of progress that this guy has been able to produce over the last decade or so. And he's since actually employed a young 23-year-old university dropout to become the head of their AI operation, which is interesting. But I do want to play a little excerpt from a video here, which I will link to the whole thing because I just think it's a very interesting video. But he actually just plays a small part of an interview with this gentleman, and I think he says some things which I feel are just plain common sense and very much in alignment with my own view. So here I am, just this swinging dick on the internet who just has an opinion and probably it isn't very informed. But here we have someone who has been involved in the industry kind of since its birth in the modern era, and he has an opinion which I am in violent agreement with. So let's hear him talk about it.
Jan LeCun, a 65-year-old professor who is widely considered to be a pioneer in AI research, found himself reporting to a 28-year-old college dropout. But even more importantly, Jan LeCun had some fundamental disagreements with Meta's AI strategy. Specifically, LeCun believes that large language models such as ChatGPT and Llama will never achieve superintelligence. In May of 2025, Jan LeCun gave an appearance on the Big Technology podcast, where he explains why.
We are not going to get to human-level AI by just scaling up LLMs. This is just not going to happen, okay?
That's your perspective.
There's no way, okay? Absolutely no way. And whatever you can hear from some of my more adventurous colleagues, it's not going to happen within the next 2 years. There's absolutely no way in hell to, pardon my French, the idea that we're going to have, a country of genius in a data center, that's complete BS, right? There's absolutely no way. What we're going to have maybe is systems that are trained on sufficiently large amounts of data that any question that any reasonable person may ask will find an answer through those systems. And it would feel like you have, a PhD sitting next to you, but it's not a PhD you have next to you. It's, a system with a gigantic memory and retrieval ability, not a system that can invent solutions to new problems, which is really what a PhD is. Okay, this is
That's the whole deal.
As I said before, if you think that we're going to get to human level AI by just training on more data and scaling up LLMs, you're making a mistake. So if you're an investor and you invest in a company that told you we're going to get to human level AI and PhD level by just training on more data and with a few tricks, I don't know if you're going to use your shirt, but that was probably not a good idea.
Okay, so he's pretty certain that a lot of this super AI hyperbolic nonsense that people like Zuckerberg and the OpenAI guy Sam Altman are espousing and selling to investors to the tunes of billions of dollars worth of investment is a road to nowhere. And I absolutely believe that. There needs to be a qualitative and completely new direction, a new innovation needs to occur that goes well beyond the current state of the art. Now, it's not to say that LLMs are not very impressive, but ultimately they are, in my opinion, kind of like a magician's magic trick. And unfortunately, everyone's falling for it. We're assuming that these things have some sort of magical, human-like capacity for comprehension and understanding, which completely fails to recognize the limitations of the technology and all it's actually doing. I think another way to describe this is there is no true creativity here. There is no novel problem solving here. It's smoke and mirrors. Everything that these things are doing is just directly derived from the data that they've been trained on. There's a level of just human cognition that simply doesn't exist in these processes. Now, I will say that it is quite possible that there is another intermediate step in between the one where the AI can be alleged to have its own true inner world. And it's possible that there can be some kind of autonomic problem-solving capabilities within the AI that no longer require any sort of prompting or coaxing from a human, so that it apparently has some kind of agency. Now, again, that is where we're entering into a very grey area where people may, and I think far more justifiably, think that this thing has an inner life and an inner world, when in fact it doesn't. But it has an ability to perform its own kind of decision making, set its own priorities, and apparently choose what it wants to learn without any prompting or engagement from us, yet not actually be in possession of an inner light. I think that is a possible thing, and in a way that is almost like the ultimate dystopian reality, that somehow humanity becomes enslaved by something that does have a capacity to autonomously make its own decisions, set its own priorities, regardless of whether they are of benefit to humanity or not, but it doesn't actually represent a legitimate kind of life form, if you like, and that humanity ultimately ends up getting replaced by it, or even made, in the ultimate dystopian science fiction vision, we are made completely extinct. We're sort of entering into Matrix territory here. But anyway, I just felt in a mood for talking about this because every time I listen to these AI videos and I listen to the fact that Altman and Elon Musk and the like are spending and planning to spend hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of investment into these technologies, I feel like we are being sold the dummy, and that we're going to end up with these massive warehouses of GPU processing power with which we scarcely have the ability to fund the electricity for, or even generate the electricity for, and yet somehow we don't have the money to spend on ensuring that people aren't living homeless, or that they are unable to afford their food bills or their children's education fees. We live in such a messed up world. I think the amount of money that's being spent on this specific line of technology is just a terrible waste. I think a fraction of that money should be spent on genuinely new research, new people working on new and innovative ways to push forward the whole idea of what it means to create AI. Instead, they've discovered LLMs, and then they're just scaling it endlessly as if something incredible is just going to magically emerge from it. Anyway, Bendy out.